Hey everybody, this is Perch. Here's a good comics conversation that has to do about comics and not the wacko person people behind them, which is always nice. Here it's Hey Perch. It's a male. In your opinion, what do you make of the general concept that a hero creates villains? It's a trope that's been done in comics and movies a few times, where the idea is ever since this city got a superhero, villains have been appearing. Before you answer, I was about to answer. There you go. Before you answer, I will note that the real world vigilante, Phoenix Jones, actually lead to some crazy people committing petty crimes and donning villain personas in the hopes of getting his attention. But if you like, we can stick to comics. We'll explain who Phoenix Jones is in a minute. And just generally, what do you make of this idea that heroes create villains in the context of comic book villains? Obviously, I don't mean heroes make people into criminals. Okay, so I don't buy it. I don't think that it's valid at all. I think that it's an engaging comic story, and it's one of those cases where somebody came up with an idea, and the idea was something along the lines of, "Hey, one way that we could make the entire story of being a hero complex is if we say, what if we kind of tease this idea that the only reason these costume villains are appearing is a result of the hero's actions, and that gives the hero extra kind of guilt slash motivation complexity around who they are. Like the hero is thinking, do I, what do I do? Should I stop being a hero and save all these lives because I'm creating villains, or do I, is it my fault? Is it not my fault? What's the individual action? It creates a moral quandary. And that's where I think that comics like that. So it makes for engaging stories. The problem is that what was an entertaining idea once or twice has turned into a little bit of silliness where now it's like, well, we don't know, we haven't come up with a new, entertaining original moral quandary to put our heroes through. So we're just going to kind of regurgitate the same one. And so it's like, well, if Batman didn't exist, then there would be no Clayface, no Joker, no Mister Freeze, no Penguin. There would be a Mister Freeze because he'd still be out there trying to kind of keep his wife from go out and sleeping with the neighbors. But I'm kidding. There you go, Jerry Duggan. Look what you did. But that logic falls apart at some extent. Now, Phoenix Jones. Phoenix Jones is a guy, in the Seattle area, Capitol Hill, who would dress up in kind of a, I would say a superhero costume, but it was kind of a half-ass superhero costume. It was like superhero cosplay, and he would go out to kind of fight crime. And to be clear, I don't believe, and I've seen the various interviews with Phoenix Jones. Remember, I used to live in the town where Phoenix Jones existed, and I've seen Phoenix Jones in real life. I don't think Phoenix Jones, in his heart, believed he was going to go out and stop villainy. I think he thought it was kind of like a neighborhood patrol, but with a superhero twist that would get him some attention. I think he liked that. He always claimed he didn't, but I think he absolutely did. And I think it was it was kind of an excuse to go out there and, fuck, what else are you going to do at night? Watch, Netflix back in the day where he was, getting more popular. I think Netflix was the, they'll mail you a DVD option. Like, what are you going to do? So he would go out and, people would cheer him on. It was kind of fun. It was like people, there's, have you ever seen one of those guys who dresses up in a costume and puts a little, jar of, for donations there, and then like they'll dress up like a statue, and they'll have very elaborate paint on them. They'll like just stand really still, and you're supposed to pay them, and then every now and then they move, and it's meant to be kind of funny. Barcelona is filled with those people, but it's kind of like that. And yes, some people showed up. I mean, when they saw Phoenix Jones getting kind of news attention, and everything else for cosplaying and dressing up, doing things, and a bunch of people dressed up in villain costumes, and were like, "Hey, let's cosplay a hero villain fight," and that's kind of how it went. It's stupid. Make no mistake about it. It was stupid, but people did it, and I mean, in that case, yes, Phoenix Jones was creating villains to show up. But the villains weren't murdering people. They weren't like, spraying poison gas on the population. They weren't robbing banks. I mean, it was all cosplay. So in comic book world though, I don't believe it. I think, look, if Batman didn't exist in Gotham, do we think that the Penguin wouldn't try and create a little criminal empire and do his thing? Of course he would. I think nobody has written the story really well that has said, because the hero dresses up in a costume and protects their identity, the villain dresses up in an equally kind of flamboyant costume and does the same thing. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's written that story, and it doesn't really exist. It's not true. It doesn't ring true for readers. It'd be hard to make that case because villains protect their identity for a very different reason. They don't want to get caught in whatever crazy shit they're up to. That's what's going on there. Heroes, on the other hand, they will protect their identity because they don't want to bring their families into the thing. They want reprisals for their actions. So it's kind of a different story. I think the idea is played out. It's happened in comics before. I don't think there's a story out there that could compellingly tell that tale at this point. If you're Wolverine, are we supposed to believe that the only reason why Sabretooth exists is because Wolverine put on a costume and did some shit for the Canadian government and then joined the X-Men? Of course not. Do we think that Lex Luthor wouldn't have been a bitch businessman who was trying to manipulate and control the world if not for Superman? Do we think Superman created that? I think you could tell the story, and people have, that Lex Luthor became obsessively focused with Superman and went to greater and greater lengths to try and beat the hero, but he was still a villain. Absolutely, he was still a villain. So that's kind of my take on the whole thing. I don't buy it. I think it's it is what it is. There's a couple tropes like that one, like a hero becomes obsessively focused on protecting humanity. They become a fascist. They start just taking away people's freedoms because they're trying to protect them too much. That's another story that's been done. It's there's a shadowy government agency that is up to no good and using superheroes to do their bidding. I mean, there's a bunch of these that we've just seen, hundreds of times, if not thousands of times before, and it's a very played out cliche at this point. And I think the idea that heroes create their villains is one of those. I don't buy it. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you believe that is there an original story that can be told around this idea? Do you think that heroes create the villains? Can you give me an example of a hero who legitimately created a villain? And in this instance, I don't mean like the hero, like Spider-Man. Look, I think Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and Eddie Brock Venom is a good example. So let's forget about the Eddie Brock face turn and the fact that he's a good guy now and all that shit. Let's just go back to when he was a villain terrorizing Mary Jane and causing chaos. I remember when Spider-Man 299 came out. It was Spider-Man Venom. It was one of the first appearances of Venom, and Marvel kind of inferred. They didn't, but they definitely inferred that Venom terrorized Mary Jane. And there was a moment there where you're like, did Eddie Brock rape Mary Jane? You got that feeling in that comic. You read it again, a lot of people, I remember, had that impression that that's what went on. It wasn't, but that was what that's what they assumed, that he did. There was that moment in time. You can call me crazy, but anyway. But even in that case, that's one people often point to that says, well, if Spider-Man wasn't Spider-Man, Eddie Brock would have never turned into Venom. And the answer is there's some truth to that, meaning, if Spider-Man didn't go to the battle world and get the black symbiote costume and bring it back and then rid himself of it and then Eddie Brock, get hold of it and it turned him into a villain. If none of that had occurred, you're right. Eddie Brock wouldn't have been Venom because there would have been no Venom. There would have been no symbiote carried back to Earth. None of that would have happened. But Eddie Brock was still a kind of dirtbag reporter who, cut corners and then had a jealousy kind of complex against Peter Parker. Like all those things, the die was cast with Eddie Brock's personality. It wasn't the fact that, Peter Parker was Spider-Man that made Eddie Brock turn evil, turn into a villain. He was already down that track. He just got the power and the ability to do more with it. So, yeah, you let me know. What are the examples of villains that only exist because of the heroes, and therefore, you could make a compelling argument to say the heroes shouldn't exist, shouldn't be doing their thing because they're creating villainy as much as stopping it. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for the question, and thanks for listening.